Hi, so this is a tutorial to walk you through the pipeline of creating a character using the readyplayer.me pipeline, and then downloading that character, importing it into Blender, and then doing a bunch of fun things in Blender, and then exporting it out ready for Mixamo, and then applying animations with Mixamo, and then downloading it once again onto your computer into Blender, and then packaging it as a gltf file for New Art City. So it's a pipeline is to play around with your character here in Ready Player, download that, prepare the file for Mixamo using Blender, upload into Mixamo, apply the animation, download again into Blender, package for New Art City. So Blender is, in this case, is not operating as anything other than like a file packager. We're not doing any editing in there or any animations. It's simply kind of packaging the files because file formats are not consistent, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on with Ready Player Me, and I'll show you that in a second. All right, so let's make sure I'm signed into Mixamo to Mixamo. And log in. And you can use your SJSU account. Continue, and then it will want me to sign in with my personal account. Okay, so this is Mixamo. You've seen this. We have a bunch of fun animations. You can apply them to different characters, and this is the last character that I was using, and this is from the Ready Player Me. All right, so we've got that, and then I want to make sure I've got Blender. So I'll put all the links in both in the Canvas assignment and then also in the YouTube tutorial. All right, so I'm going to want a clear canvas here, so I'm going to hit A to select all, and then X, and that will delete everything. So I don't want to see anything up in my outliner here. Clear canvas. I'm going to go back into my first part one, which is the Ready Player Me. I'm going to select full body. Don't specify. I'll use a photo, or can I go back? Allow. Allow. Okay, there we go. And then it wants like a neutral face. Sure. But it's just using like, simple facial recognition algorithm, doing like color of your hair. I don't think it's like doing a particularly fancy job. All right, that looks great. If I wanted to change my costume, I could change my costume. We'll use kind of like Carhartt overalls. I like that. And then we'll say next and continue without sign up. And you can go in and play with hair and change beard and eye color and all those fun things. I'm just going to use the defaults. And so this is my avatar. I'm going to say copy. So it's copying this download link, and then in a new tab, I'm going to put that in the download link and hit return. So Mixamo knows, or Ready Player Me knows enough to allow us to download this wonderful .glb file format, which is a file format made especially for what we're doing, which is moving between programs, uploading it to the web. It creates 3D models that can contain animation data, color data about the materials, a bunch of fun things in one file. So I'm going to create a new folder here. So one of the things that's going to be really important is Mixamo is keeping all of your files in one folder. Unfortunately, this GLB file format is not accepted by Mixamo, so hence the kind of Blender packaging and repackaging. So I'm going to do a new folder in there. We'll say Ready Player Mixamo at Mixamo, and then test one. It's like really tests like 1 million, but I'm on a new computer. All right, so we've got this file. I'm going to take this long name and I'm going to stick it in that folder that I just made. And I'm not gonna change the name of this at all. But what I'm gonna do is import this into Blender. So I'm gonna say File, Import, and then gltf. If you don't have that option, you want to make sure that you have that plug-in turned on in your preferences. You can go into Edit, and then Preferences, and then Add-ons, and search gltf, and then there's an Import-Export gltf that you want to make sure is checked off. So that is, again, this import under Add-ons, search for GLT, and it should come up. You also want to make sure if, I can't remember if by default the FBX is also, but if you type in FBX, you also want to make sure the export FBX format is also checked off. So I'm going to say File, Import, GLTF. That's the file format that Ready Player exported in. That's in my Downloads folder, in that new folder I made. Where is here? I'm going to import that GLTF. So when the file imports were still in kind of shading mode, right? So we've got our wireframe shading, our texture, and then our rendering node. So it's the third circle over. We'll give you the color data. So what's been happening historically when we're testing this in class was this color data was getting stripped away. So the color data is being saved in that GLB file format in one file. That's why GLB file formats were made for this kind of process, to be able to go in between different platforms, so you didn't have to kind of attach all of the various little bits of information into one file. It just contained it all. The problem is if you're trying to if you need to go backwards and like export as an FBX or one of those file formats where the bits and pieces are a little bit more separate, it's harder to extract that data. It's not impossible, but that's what we're going to do. So we need, because Mixamo needs us to upload in FBX or OBJ file formats, we are going to have to extract all of the color data from this GLB file and then save it in a folder called textures. Before we do that, we need to save the Blender file. So go ahead and say File. I'm going to say Save As. I'm going to save it in that same folder here under Downloads. And this test1 folder, and I'm going to call this Ready Player Mixamo New York City Test 1. Okay, so now we need to go into another view mode to kind of get access to all of the images. That's under the Shading tab here. We're going to go click on Shading. And then you can see in this little tab down at the lower left-hand corner, this is all of the images that are associated with our file. So that's the eye, there's the face texture, there is the overall texture. So we're going to save all of these images that were packed into the GLB file as a separate, in a separate folder called textures. So for the first one, I'm going to click on the first image, and then I'm going to go into this little hamburger icon, and I'm going to say under Image, I'm going to say Save As. And that will allow me to make I want to make sure that I'm in my folder. So in my Mixamo Test 1 folder, I'm going to create a new folder, this little folder with a plus icon. I'm going to name it exactly TEXTURES. Textures all lowercase. And then I'm going to click into that folder and then just go ahead and save as image. And then I'm going to click down to the next image. And this body texture never shows up as a preview for me, so in any of the tests, so don't worry about that. And then I want to click down and I'm going to double check to see what the hotkey is for just save. So this little icon is the option on a Mac, and it's an uppercase F. So that means that in order to save these images, what I want to do is use the hotkeys. I'm going to have to, on my Mac, hit Alt or Option, Shift, and then S. And then that brings up my save, and it automatically defaults to the last folder in that textures folder. So I'm going to hit Enter, save as image, and then I'm going to go down to the next, the hair texture, Alt Shift S, and then Enter. The computer's being really laggy. Okay, so I have gone through and I saved each one of these image files into a separate folder called image texture, or called textures. So you can see here are all of those files. You don't need to save the viewer node or the render result, but if you have, that's okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt anything, but those are not necessary files. But everything else is. So now that I've done that, so some of these are obviously image files, like the face texture for the face, and then some of them, those purple ones, are just telling the program which way light is going to hit the object, and it's like here's the hair. It's a cheap and dirty way to fake more complex kind of, it's called bump mapping. So it's a way to fake more complex geometry without it adding any more geometry. It's a computationally efficient way to add detail to your image textures. So you need all of those because those kind of get fed into the image textures as well. All right, so now that we've done that, we can go back into our layout from our top view here. And now we can, we've deleted all of our other files in there, our sun, our light, and our camera, and that kind of cube. So now we can select our character. So click B on your keyboard, tap B for box select, and you should get the crosshairs, and then you can drag out a box around your character. That should select all of your files. And now we want to export this as an FBX for Mixamo. So we're going to say File, Export, FBX. And the FBX settings that I have had good luck with, I don't think I saved them here, were selected objects. And under, just to be careful, I'm going to uncheck the empty camera and lamp and just select the armature, hold down Shift, and then select Other and Mesh. So this will only export selected objects, and only objects that have that are armatures, mesh, or other. I'm going to apply transform. That worked out well for me. And then under armature, I think I used only deform bones, and I unchecked add leaf bones, which worked well for me. And then I unchecked bake animation because we actually don't have any animation. And I think the geometry was just the default. Yeah. So, all right, so now, again, that's selected objects, armature, mesh, and other. I checked this experimental apply transformation. The defaults in geometry were good. And then under armature, I unselected add leaf bones, and I checked off only deform bones. And then this test one, FBX is fine. I'm going to select export FBX, make sure it's going into that folder where there's the folder with the textures. Great. And so what that should look like is you now have your folder. You have this kind of like original GLB file. You have your Blender file that you've saved. You have your textures with all of your image textures, and then this is just kind of like a ghost properties file that gets saved with your Blender file. And then you have your FBX file, which you just exported. So we're going to take that FBX file and we're going to import it into Mixamo. So I'm going to drag and drop. The FBX file, as it stands, won't show up with the color data in Mixamo. That's fine because it's looking for these image textures that we have in a separate folder. That's totally fine. When you bring it back in and repackage it, it will reconnect. All right, so that looks great. I'm going to click Next. Proceed, that's fine. And then we're going to do a jumping down. How about a jumping down? Woo, that's fantastic. It's a great jump, great jump. All right, so now we can say download. I'm not going to, if you want to kind of change the speed, you can change the overdrive, the distance. I haven't played with that, but let's see what happens. Oh yeah, maybe the character is jumping further or traveling further. Yeah, maybe slightly different. The overdrive is the speed, right? So this is going to make it happen faster. Or if you want it to kind of be slower, you can have it like a slow motion. And then if you want to kind of trim off some frames, like if you wanted to start kind of mid-air so that the character is just kind of flying down, you can trim from the front end or the back end. All right. These defaults are fine for me. So I'm going to say download. And all the defaults, we want to do FBX binary. All the defaults here are great. Say download. And this is going to automatically, download wherever your default folder is. So for me, that's in my downloads here. Jumping down, and I'm going to drag it back into my working folder here, my test one. Okay, so now when I bring this jumping down FBX file back into Blender, it will have a material information that didn't show up because the texture files weren't available in Mixamo, but when I export now for New Art City, it should show up again. So I am going to save this, just in case I need to export again. I have all my data and my information in one place together. I don't know why my computer's being so slow. Probably because I have 1 million Chrome tabs open. All right, and now I'm going to File New, General. Again, I'm going to hit A to select all, X to delete everything, and then I'm going to import that FBX file that I just made with the animation data. So import FBX, go back into my jumping down FBX, import FBX, and when I turn my textures back on, you can see it's now reconnected back to my textures. And you can see down here, here's all the keyframes. I can hit play. Very slow on the save side, but pretty quick on that GPU. On the animation side. That's the graphic side. That's great. That's fine. All right, so lovely. I've got my animation is in there. It's ready to go. Now I can hit File, Export, gltf. All right, so now I'm going to go back into that same folder, and I'm going to name this RH Car Art. I think that's how you spell it, jump, suit, and jumping. And I'll just test one just to be complete. All right, So export GLTF. I'm going to export it as a GLTF embedded. I'm going to include the selected objects. Want to make sure again that I have my objects selected, and if I imported it and didn't deselect anything, that would be the case. If you need to do the box select, do the box select all your objects. Make sure you don't have any cameras or lights or anything, just the selected objects. The transform Y up, the geometry defaults are good, and then the animation, you want to make sure that you have your animation selected, and that all of the kind of all of these defaults are selected, and shape keys and skinning is also selected. And we're going to export GLTF. Okay, so now we should be able to go, our file has exported, is here, RH Carhartt jumpsuit jumping test 1. This is what I'm going to import into New York City. So let's go ahead, New York City. Log in. Excuse me, long day. We're going to go into the Factory of the Sun Summer Students Sandbox 1, edit, and then we can upload. I'm going to upload artwork file, and Factory of the Sun. I don't know why it's not showing up, but I want the GLTF. Let's see what happens. Awesome. So there's my character ready to start jumping. I can see the color data is there, and if I go into the preview, I can kind of see my character there making her brilliant jump from miles high. All right, so that is the workflow. Slightly more complicated than the make human, just because we have to save all the image textures, but more or less the same workflow, same process.